Welcome back to my channel Chaos Coder. In this video, we're going to unravel the Angular file structure and explain how an Angular application works. Understanding the structure is crucial because once you know what each file does, you'll have a solid foundation for building any Angular project. We'll be using Visual Studio Code as our IDE. It's a powerful, lightweight editor that works well with Angular and makes development easy. This IDE is feature-rich and comes with great support for Angular, including extensions for TypeScript, HTML, and CSS. Let's get started. Let's open our My First app that we created in our previous video in VS Code. You'll notice several folders and files have been created for you. This is Angular's default structure. Let's go through each of these folders and files so you know what they're for. The first folder you'll see is the Angular cache folder. This folder holds cache data used by the Angular CLI to speed up development builds. Inside it, you have version-specific folders, in this case 18.2.3, which stores the cache for this version of Angular. The .ts build info file tracks incremental TypeScript builds. It helps Angular recompile only what's necessary, making your development process faster. Next, you'll notice the Vite deps folder. Vite is a modern build tool that's fast and optimized, often used as an alternative to Webpack. Inside this folder, we have several JavaScript files like angular_core.js, angular_router.js, and others. These files contain the core Angular libraries that your application relies on. You'll also see chunk files, which Vite generates to optimize and split your code into smaller bundles, improving performance and loading times. Moving on to the .vs Code folder, this is specific to Visual Studio Code and holds configuration files. Extensions.json, this file recommends extensions that can enhance the development experience in VS Code, such as Angular language services. Launch.json, this file configures how the application runs in debugging mode. Tasks.json, this file sets up tasks for automating various processes, like building or testing the application. The node_modules folder contains all of the dependencies that your Angular project needs to run. When you run npm install, all the packages listed in the package.json file are installed here. You should never manually edit anything in this folder, as it's automatically managed by npm. The public folder contains assets that can be directly served to the browser. You have the favicon.ico file here, which is the icon that appears in the browser tab when someone opens your app. You can place other static files in this folder as well, such as images or documents that don't need to be processed by Angular. Now let's dive into the heart of the Angular project, the src folder. This is where most of your application code lives. Inside the app folder, you have several important files related to your Angular application. The app.component.css file contains the CSS styles specific to the app component. The app.component.html is the template file where you define the HTML structure of the app component. The app.component.spec.ts file contains unit tests for the app component. It ensures that your component behaves as expected. The app.component.ts is a TypeScript file that defines the app component class. It contains the logic and data used in the HTML template. The app.config.ts file contains configuration details for your app. The app.routes.ts is where your application routes are defined. Angular uses this to navigate between different components and views. Next, we have the index.html file. This file is the single HTML file that gets loaded when your application is launched. It's mostly empty because Angular dynamically loads and inserts content into this file. The only part of your app that gets directly inserted here is the root app root tag, which corresponds to your main component. Then we have main.ts, the entry point of your Angular application. This is where Angular bootstraps your app module and starts the app. When you run ngserve, this file is executed first. The styles.css file is where you can define global styles for your entire Angular application. Any styles defined here will apply across all components, unless they are overridden by component-specific styles. Outside the src folder, you'll notice several important configuration files. The .editor config file helps maintain consistent coding styles between developers. The .gitignore lists the files and directories that should not be tracked by Git, like node modules. The angular.json is a critical configuration file for Angular CLI. It contains settings for building, serving, testing, and linting your project. The package.json file lists the dependencies of your project and also defines scripts for common tasks like starting the development server or running tests. The readme.md file is for documentation purposes, where you can write instructions or details about the project. The tsconfig.app.json is the TypeScript configuration file specific to the Angular application, excluding the test files. The tsconfig.spec.json TypeScript config is for test files, ensuring that your testing environment is properly set up. The tsconfig.json, the main configuration file for TypeScript, which is used for type checking and compiling your TypeScript code into JavaScript. An Angular application operates through a combination of templates, components, data binding, directives, and services. Components manage the application logic and data. Templates define the user interface, determining what the user sees. Data binding connects the components and templates, allowing for dynamic updates in real time. This ensures that any change in the data is immediately reflected in the user interface, and vice versa. Directives like ngf and ng4 enhance the power of templates by conditionally rendering or looping through elements. Services provide functionality that can be shared across multiple components. The injector facilitates the use of these services, enhancing modularity and maintainability. Together, these elements form the backbone of Angular applications. The browser ultimately renders the output, and Angular's powerful rendering system ensures that only the necessary parts of the application are updated, making it highly efficient and responsive. And that's a complete overview of Angular's file structure and how it works behind the scenes. Now that you understand how Angular organizes your project, you'll find it much easier to build and scale your applications. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.